Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Ellen Wilson, and I'll be the moderator for this expert briefing for the media, which is hosted by the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Today's experts will discuss efforts to control and prevent malaria around the world. I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers. Jane Carlton is director of the Johns Hopkins Malaria Research Institute at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and a professor in the Department of Molecular Microbiology and Immunology at the school. Conor McMeniman is an assistant professor in the Department of Molecular Microbiology and Immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. We will have time for questions following our speakers' remarks. We will take some that have been submitted in advance of the briefing and some from the Zoom chat. If you have a question, please enter it in the Zoom chat addressed to panelists and hosts. Please enter your name, media outlet, and question. We hope to cover as many as possible. Please note that participants are welcome to use images, video, or quotes directly from the briefing, and that the content is for immediate release. Participants will be muted during this briefing and it will be recorded. Dr. Carlton, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today to discuss the status of malaria and the pivotal role that our institute is playing as we continue the fight against this global disease into the future. World Malaria Day, held each year on April the 25th, is a call for continued investment and sustained commitment to malaria prevention and control by the worldwide malaria community. The importance of this goal is paramount. The latest figures from the World Health Organization estimate approximately 250 million malaria cases and more than 600,000 deaths per year. Tragically, 3/4 of these deaths occur in children under the age of 5, mostly in countries of sub-Saharan Africa, but also India and Southeast Asia. Fighting malaria is a complex global health challenge involving interactions between 3 dynamic organisms: humans, the malaria parasite, and the mosquitoes that transmit it. Global progress towards eliminating malaria has stalled in recent years and has faced unprecedented challenges, made even more acute during the COVID-19 pandemic, which diverted valuable resources. Drug resistance in the malaria parasite and insecticide resistance in mosquitoes threaten the pillars we use to control malaria. And invasive mosquitoes that transmit malaria have recently appeared in cities of African countries, posing a threat to urban malaria transmission. These challenges occur against the backdrop and uncertain impact of armed conflicts, ecological disasters, and climate change that have the potential to shift the geographic distribution and transmission patterns of malaria as we know it. Nevertheless, there is some cause for optimism. This past year, the World Health Organization recommended the use of 2 groundbreaking malaria vaccines for the prevention of Plasmodium falciparum malaria, the most serious form of the disease, in children living in malarious countries. New advanced bed nets have also been recommended by the World Health Organization that are expected to mitigate a common mode of insecticide resistance in mosquito populations in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere. And the goal of malaria elimination has been achieved in an expanding list of countries, including Azerbaijan, Belize, and Tajikistan, with several other countries on track to eliminate the disease in the coming year. However, we need to continue building momentum towards a malaria-free future. Together, through continued investment and sustained commitment to malaria prevention and control by the world community, we can achieve this important goal. And here at the Malaria Institute, we are committed to combating malaria through cutting-edge research, collaborations with endemic country researchers, clinicians, and health workers, and leading science for a malaria-free world.
Thank you, Dr. Carlton. Now we will hear from Dr. McMeniman. Dr. McMeniman, please go ahead.
Thanks for joining us today ahead of World Malaria Day. Malaria is an age-old problem, and from a scientific perspective, it's particularly exciting times to be a malaria researcher, given the many cutting-edge technological advances available to us as a global research community to combat this disease. We are tackling malaria on a global stage in several different ways, studying the malaria parasite and the mosquitoes that transmit this devastating pathogen, as well as the humans afflicted by malaria. Malaria is transmitted to humans by the infectious bite of a female mosquito. Excitingly, we have made important strides over the past year towards understanding the biology of these mosquitoes, particularly the chemistry of mosquito attraction to human scent. This has included our collaborative work with partners in Zambia to develop the world's largest multi-choice smell test to rank the attractiveness of human scent samples to the African malaria mosquito, a unique system that we believe has the potential to finally answer the age-old question, why do mosquitoes like some humans more than others? We are now leveraging these advances to engineer synthetic blends of chemicals that mimic human scent to enhance our ability to mass trap malaria mosquitoes. Secondly, work continues at the Malaria Institute to build a better mosquito that stops malaria transmission. This important goal includes the application of cutting-edge genetic engineering approaches to make mosquitoes less competent to support the development and transmission of malaria parasites, as well as the identification of natural microbes with the potential to block malaria transmission. Malaria Institute scientists have also made several important advances over the past year developing better diagnostics and therapeutics. These include a portable device that delivers early, cost-effective detection of mosquito resistance to insecticides, developing a chemical vaccine for malaria by repurposing a known anti-malarial drug that is long-acting, providing weeks of protection from malaria, as well as the continued optimization of human monoclonal antibodies that prevent malaria infections with the potential to inform better vaccine design. Further, by harnessing multidisciplinary technologies, including genomics, we are tackling in the lab and in the field genetically diverse populations of parasites and mosquitoes that cause malaria and threaten public health. As recently exemplified by the COVID pandemic, science empowers humanity to fight infectious disease at scale, and malaria should be no exception. One of our priorities is strengthening our commitment with our field partners in Zambia, India, Ethiopia, and elsewhere around the globe to generate accelerated pipelines to take innovations from laboratory to field. It is also important to note that all malaria is local, and the United States is no exception. Since 1951, malaria has been considered officially eliminated in the US, but last year we experienced 10 cases in 4 states. We are working to gain a better understanding of the biology of malaria vectors, both here and abroad, by developing specialized field cages to study under contained conditions the mosquitoes that transmit malaria, as well as, secondly, developing a biobank of parasites from imported malaria cases into the US to provide a living archive of genetically diverse parasites worldwide that can be used to improve our current control interventions. Our work is not over. Together with continued investment and sustained commitment to malaria prevention and control, we can realize a malaria-free future. Thanks for joining us today. Professor Carlton and I would now be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Dr. McMeniman. Now we will take questions. Here's the first question from Ian Johnston at the Financial Times. For you, Dr. Carlton, how directly comparable are current efficacy data on the R21 and RTSS vaccines? Which is the more effective vaccine?
This is a very exciting time for us. For the first time, we have these 2 approved vaccines approved by the WHO. They are complementary to each other. Both are safe and effective, and both prevent around 75% of malaria episodes when given in conjunction with other control methods such as antimalarial drugs. there is no evidence that one vaccine performs better than the other. And really, countries need to choose which one to use based upon the vaccine supply and affordability.
Great, thank you. And follow-ups on this question from Tina Say at Science News. Has there been substantial reduction in malaria attributable to vaccines? Is there any indication that resistance might develop against the vaccines? For you, Dr. Carlton.
Yes, from the clinical trials which have been performed to date, and introduction of the first vaccine in 3 pilot countries, which were Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi, this resulted in about 13% drop in mortality among children that were eligible for vaccination, and also a substantial reduction in hospitalizations for severe malaria. The pilot program was completed at the end of 2023, and all 3 countries are continuing their vaccination programs for the longer term.
Great.
I should also remark about the issue of potential resistance. The term used is vaccine escape, and so far there is no evidence that the parasite will evade an immune response elicited by the vaccines. Obviously, this will be continue to be monitored closely in the coming years.
Great, thank you. Here is a question from Farai Matsaka at Associated Press, and also Tamar Khan at Business Live. For you, Dr. McMeniman, to what extent is climate change a threat to overturning relative success in combating malaria in countries that seem to have made significant strides in reducing malaria outbreaks, such as Zimbabwe? Also, the extent of the threat to relatively low-risk regions, such as Southern Africa.
Absolutely. As we all know, climate change is a major challenge that faces humanity. And the impact that climate change will have on malaria transmission is somewhat complex. There is potential for climate change through global warming, increases in temperature, as well as an increasing frequency of natural disasters to actually change the landscape of malaria transmission as we know it. From twofold, temperatures will promote the development of the malaria parasite, with warmer temperatures potentially accelerating that process. And also, mosquitoes love to breed in water. And as such, with increasing rainfall associated with different climatic changes, there is always potential for larger mosquito populations, for instance. And malaria may move into areas that we haven't seen transmission occur before, particularly areas of higher altitude. Also establishing in areas where we currently have malaria, or returning to areas previously that malaria used to be transmitted in.
Great, thank you. Another question for you, Dr. McMeniman, from Annalisa Morelli at STAT. I would like to know the experts' thoughts on new malaria nets developed for insecticide-resistant mosquitoes. Several trials and pilot programs have given encouraging results. So I'm curious to understand what role this technology plays in the overall strategy to control malaria.
Yes, insecticide resistance is one of the major challenges to combating malaria throughout the world. Insecticide-treated bed nets are a frontline measure used in coordination, often with indoor residual spraying, to really kill the mosquitoes that transmit malaria. Excitingly, this past year, there's been a strong recommendation for new dual ingredient insecticide-treated bed nets that are purposed to break the most common mode of insecticide resistance in mosquitoes that transmit malaria in sub-Saharan Africa, a mode of resistance called pyrethroid resistance. So I think these new dual ingredient nets are an extremely exciting development for malaria control.
Great, thank you. Here's a question from Sarah Newley at The Telegraph for Dr. Carlton. How much could parasites with mutations that evade rapid tests, the Anopheles stephensi mosquito, and rising drug resistance threaten efforts to curb malaria? Are they the biggest threats, or are there others?
No, that's a very good question. Those are actually quite separate issues. The mutations that occur in what's called the histidine-rich protein, the HRP2 protein, those mean that the parasite is not detectable by rapid diagnostic tests. And this phenomenon has started to be reported throughout many states in India and also in African countries as well. And it is a significant threat for us to be able to diagnose people who are carrying parasites. The spread of the Anopheles stevensii invasive mosquito is another issue as well. And this has first been reported in cities in African countries. And this is certainly cause for concern as well.
Great, thank you. And more on this, questions from Tamar Khan at Business Live and Tina Say at Science News for you, Dr. McMeniman. How worried should we be about the potential spread of Anopheles stephensi mosquitoes into southern Africa and in urban areas of Africa? Are they resistant to insecticides?
Yes, so the Anopheles stevensii mosquito is a major concern for public health throughout sub-Saharan Africa at the moment. This mosquito species is incredibly hardy. It's also adaptable, and it thrives in urban environments. And as such, it really poses a great threat to changing the landscape of malaria transmission throughout sub-Saharan Africa. Previously, malaria has been considered a rural disease in sub-Saharan Africa, and the ability of Anopheles stevensii to breed and to very, very large numbers, and particularly be able to lay its eggs and have its immature stages thrive in containers such as rainwater storage tanks, construction pits, and other water storage containers in and around humans. Really is an area for concern and one to watch over the coming year with regards to malaria transmission.
Great, thank you. More on mosquitoes for you, Dr. McMeniman, from Tom Rosenthal at Infectious Disease Special Edition. Why are some people more attracted to mosquitoes than others? If it's related to diet, are there foods that make people more or less attractive?
Yes, an excellent question. So from a distance, the way that mosquitoes detect humans is via their sense of smell. First, they smell you, and then they pick up on actually chemicals that we emit in our human skin odor and also our breath. As they smell these chemicals, they fly towards you, then they're able to see you, and when they get close enough, they're able to feel the warmth from your skin. From our group at Johns Hopkins has actually revealed that humans that are most attractive to the malaria mosquito have body odor or human scent signatures that are enriched for a class of molecules called airborne carboxylic acids, and also other compounds that are putatively produced by the bacteria that live on our skin. It's definitely true that the way that we smell to mosquitoes is dictated by our diet, our genetics and resulting physiology, as well as the microbes that live on our skin surfaces. As to whether diet can modulate the attractiveness of individuals to mosquitoes, I think this is a really exciting area for future research, and one that we hope to be able to address using the multi-choice smell test systems that we've developed recently in collaboration with partners in Zambia.
Great, and further questions on this topic from Apollonia Adeyemi at the News Telegraph in Nigeria. What are the new innovations that will keep mosquito bites away from humans? And related, much has been said about gene-produced mosquitoes. How far can this go in fighting malaria?
Yes, these are both excellent questions. From the perspective of new innovations on the horizon, every year we have an improved understanding of the molecular mechanics of the mosquito's sense of smell. Harnessing genome engineering technology, we can now gain a very high-resolution understanding of how mosquitoes smell humans. And that could be used in two different ways to create new innovations to combat mosquito-borne diseases. One is by building a better insect repellent that jams or masks, how mosquitoes smell humans. Secondly, if we can understand the chemical basis of mosquito attraction to humans, we can engineer synthetic blends of chemicals or fragrances that smell even better than the most attractive human to lure mosquitoes into traps for mass control purposes. From the perspective of genetic engineering, there's quite a lot of research ongoing at the moment to create mosquitoes that are less competent to transmit malaria, a better mosquito, if you like, that could really provide a way to control malaria transmission. There's also ongoing research to create different strategies to either replace mosquito populations with mosquitoes that cannot transmit malaria or other mosquito-borne diseases, as well as genetic methods that suppress mosquito populations to impact transmission by having less mosquitoes flying in and around our homes around the globe.
Great, thank you. For you, Dr. Carlton, a question from John Stone Wangai at Radio Pomoja. What's the best medicine for malaria?
So when an individual is diagnosed as having malaria parasites in their blood, there are different treatment options depending upon the age of the patient. For example, whether the patient is a child or a pregnant woman, and also the geographical location of the patient. This is because the parasite is resistant to anti-malarial drugs in varying degrees in different countries. Most falciparum infections, in fact, are treated with what are called artemisinin combination therapy, or ACTs, and also with quinine sulfite and an antibiotic. However, if there is a different species of malaria parasite, for example, Plasmodium vivax, because this has a dormant stage in the liver, it requires what is called radical treatment, so treatment with other drugs to destroy the parasites in the liver.
Great, thank you. And another question for you, Dr. Carlton. With the emergence of locally acquired malaria cases in the US after 2 decades, what factors are contributing to this resurgence, and what measures are being taken to address this concerning trend?
Yes, perhaps a little bit of background here. There are approximately 2,000 cases of what's called travelers' malaria each year in the United States. And these are people who travel abroad to malarious countries, get infected with malaria parasites, and fall sick when they come back to the US. But what made last year unusual is that there were 10 cases of malaria in 4 states where the infected individuals had not traveled to a malarious country recently. And whereas most of them were vivax malaria, in Maryland, there was 1 case of falciparum malaria, the most deadly species, as we have mentioned. So obviously, the Maryland Department of Health and other departments of health in Florida, Arkansas, and Texas will be monitoring this situation very closely this summer. And it is too early to call this a trend. We actually have the mosquito vectors here in the US that can transmit malaria parasites. And malaria was very common in the 1800s until it was eradicated in the 1950s. It may be that regional changes in climate are enabling the mosquito vector populations to rise, but more studies that look into local US mosquito populations are required. And this is something that our institute is planning to do in the future.
Great, thank you so much. A question for you, Dr. McMeniman. This is from Diana Kellers from Nature Africa. You mentioned that you are also working with partners in Ethiopia. Is that similar to the work in Zambia or something completely different?
Yeah, so predominantly our work is currently based in Zambia, but I'll just hand it over to Dr. Carlton that will be able to talk about the work in Ethiopia that her group is performing.
Yes, that's right. My group have started a collaboration with a couple of institutes in Ethiopia, and this has really come out of the International Centers of Excellence for Malaria Research program funded by the NIH, which funds 10 centers of excellence around the globe. And one of these centers of excellence is based in India that I've been the director of, and there is another one which has also been based in Ethiopia. And so we have decided to partner up, in particular to start to look at or using novel genomics technologies to be able to understand the interaction of the parasite with humans directly from donor samples. So this is very exciting, a new area of research for us, and something that we will be really moving forward with in the coming years.
Great, thank you. And for you, Dr. Carlton, as well, just looking at this issue again, summarizing, in what ways do drug and insecticide resistance, as well as climate change, pose significant obstacles to malaria control efforts? And what strategies are being explored to overcome these challenges?
Yes, it's quite phenomenal. The malaria parasite has become resistant to almost every single anti-malarial drug developed against it. And the spread of insecticide resistance throughout countries in Africa and Southeast Asia has also been extraordinary. We now know that the impact of climate change resulted in significant flooding in Pakistan, and that caused an epidemic of malaria cases in 2022. So drug and insecticide resistance, as well as climate change, pose significant obstacles to the control efforts. New strategies, as Dr. McMeniman described, include new formulations for bed nets to try and provide a better way for not being bitten by insecticide-resistant mosquitoes. And then also new developments in RNA-based vaccine and lipid-based formulations, which really arose through the development of COVID-19 vaccines. And these are starting to look very promising for malaria vaccine. Also, research continues on what's called the druggable genome. So this is identifying small molecules that can interact with proteins from some of the 5,000 genes of the parasite.
Great, thank you. And a reminder, if you have a question, please do enter it in the Zoom chat addressed to panelists and hosts. Here is our last question for you, Dr. McMeniman. Can you discuss the potential implications of recent discoveries in mosquito biology, such as decoding human scent signatures and modifying mosquito senses, for the development of new strategies against not only malaria, but also other mosquito-borne diseases like dengue fever? I know you've gone through some of this, but if you could give us a summary again, and then maybe its application to other mosquito-borne diseases like dengue.
Absolutely. Yeah, so over the past 10 years, there's been an accelerated understanding of the molecular basis of mosquito attraction to humans, primarily by characterizing the chemoreceptors that mosquitoes use to detect human emitted chemicals. This is a particularly exciting time in this particular field because with this knowledge to hand, we can now develop new, more effective repellents, but also potentially turn the mosquito's sense of smell against them by engineering synthetic blends of chemicals that are highly attractive to mosquitoes that could be used in conjunction with insecticide-treated targets or novel low-cost traps that would be make it possible to mass trap mosquitoes for control of malaria and other mosquito-borne diseases. The most dangerous mosquitoes for human health are those that have evolved a strong innate attraction to human scent. And as such, these include mosquito species such as the mosquito that transmits dengue, a mosquito known as Aedes aegypti, that loves to live in and around humans. And as such, we hope that research into the sense of smell in the African malaria mosquito as well, which is also highly human preferring, could help to inform strategies to control other blood-sucking insects that love humans.
Great. Thank you to both of you for your presentations and insightful answers. We will email the links to the resources mentioned today and shared in the chat. And with that, I'd like to say thank you again to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.